All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the legacy of a man who literally commanded massive armies and conquered mighty empires, yet willfully chose to sleep on a rough, simple mat. We're talking about Abu Ubaidah ibn Al-Jarrah. He's a foundational figure in early Islamic history, and honestly, his life completely rewrites our modern rulebook on leadership, wealth, and loyalty within the Ummah, the global Muslim community. So, let's just dive straight into this paradox, because it's a big one. How exactly does the supreme military commander of the Levant, literally the absolute richest province of that era, end up living in a hut with nothing but a sword to his name? It kind of defies human nature, right? You know, most people who get a taste of absolute power completely succumb to absolute luxury, but not Abu Ubaidah. Today, we're going to explore the staggering contrast of a guy who reached the absolute pinnacle of worldly success, but willfully embraced extreme poverty and self-denial.
And this really gets to the heart of his identity. He held this profound title, Amin al-Ummah, which translates to the trustworthy of the Ummah. And he didn't just give it to himself. It was bestowed upon him directly by Prophet Muhammad. There's this famous moment when the people of Najran came looking for someone to teach them the faith and, settle their disputes. The Prophet specifically chose Abu Ubaidah, saying he'd sent a strong, trustworthy individual. Now, that wasn't just a casual compliment. It was a defining mandate that anchors his entire historical story. Every single decision he made from that day forward, it was a massive test of that exact trustworthiness.
You see, his life wasn't some slow, peaceful walk in the park. It was more like a crucible of rapidly escalating trials. Over the span of just about a decade or so, he goes from facing these brutal physical and emotional tests on the battlefields of Badr and Uhud straight into the ultimate spiritual test of leadership during the catastrophic plague of Amwas. Each one of these dates represents a moment where that title, the trustworthy, was violently, intensely put to the test.
Let's jump back to 624 CE. Try to put yourself in his shoes for a second during the Battle of Badr. This wasn't just your standard political skirmish. It was a deeply personal nightmare. Abu Ubaidah faced the agonizing reality of being relentlessly hunted down in combat by his own father, Abu Ubaidah ibn Al-Jarrah, who was fighting for the opposing Meccan army. The historical accounts tell us Abu Ubaidah kept dodging, constantly trying to avoid his father in the chaos. But his father cornered him. He forced the engagement. So, left with absolutely no other choice to protect his faith and his brothers in arms, Abu Ubaidah struck and killed his own father.
It's a heavy moment. But the crucial takeaway here is that this devastating personal sacrifice was actually immortalized. According to theological sources, this exact agonizing event is cited as the context for this specific Quranic verse from Surah Al-Mujadala. It's proof that his loyalty to his faith was absolutely unbreakable. In a fiercely tribal society where your bloodline was literally everything, Abu Ubaidah proved that his spiritual covenant actually superseded his biological one. And that unwavering loyalty, it got tested physically the very next year, in 625 CE, at the Battle of Uhud. This was a completely chaotic, terrifying moment. The Muslim lines unexpectedly collapsed under a massive cavalry charge, and total panic set in. But while a lot of people fled, Abu Ubaidah was among this tiny, dedicated handful of men who stood their ground. He voluntarily turned himself into a human shield, forming a tight defensive circle right around Prophet Muhammad to protect him from the incoming onslaught of weapons. His devotion here goes way beyond standard military duty. In the middle of all this chaos, the Prophet was struck in the face, and 2 iron links from his chainmail helmet got deeply embedded in his cheeks. Abu Bakr rushed over to help, but Abu Ubaidah actually pleaded to be the one to extract them. He knew that using his hands would cause the Prophet excruciating pain, so he bit down on the metal links with his bare teeth. He pulled the first one out and lost an upper front tooth. He bit down on the second and lost a lower front tooth. He permanently lost his incisors, earning the nickname Athram, the toothless one, all to protect his leader from pain.
Okay, fast forward about a decade. Abu Ubaidah isn't just a foot soldier anymore. He is now the commander-in-chief and governor-general of Syria, the Levant. We're talking about the wealthiest, most resource-rich province of the entire expanding empire. He's controlling the distribution of massive, unimaginable war spoils. But despite running this incredibly wealthy region, we see this staggering contrast between the massive wealth all around him and his own extreme asceticism, a concept in Islam known as zuhd. He completely, actively detached himself from worldly pleasures.
To really wrap our heads around this, just imagine Caliph Umar's absolute shock. He pays a surprise inspection visit to Syria. Now, Umar was the leader of the entire Islamic empire, and a guy known for his own strictness, right? So he asks to see the home of his brother Abu Ubaidah, literally the most powerful man in the Levant. Umar steps inside his personal living quarters, obviously expecting at least the basic everyday comforts suited for a provincial governor.
But instead, he walks into a simple hut made of date palm branches, and inside, a sword, a shield, a saddlebag, a sleeping mat, and a wooden dish with some dry bread scraps dipped in water. That was it. The whole shebang, the entire worldly possessions of the man running the richest province in the world. It so vividly reveals a man who is utterly, completely uncorrupted by absolute power. He took absolutely nothing for himself.
Which brings us to one of the most emotional moments in early Islamic history. Seeing this incredibly stark, empty room, Caliph Omar, a man renowned for his toughness, just broke down and began to weep. He realized that while the expanding empire and the massive influx of wealth, the dunya, the material world, was starting to test and change everyone around him, it hadn't touched Abu Ubaidah, not one bit. This heart-wrenching quote really captures Omar's realization that worldly temptations had completely failed to sway the trustworthy of the Ummah.
But the final and definitely the most tragic test of his trustworthiness hit in 638 CE with the devastating plague of Amwas. This was a catastrophic epidemic that just swept through Syria. Caliph Umar was desperate to save his most trusted commander, right? So he writes his secret letter to Abu Ubaidah. He disguises his real intentions, ordering him to return to Medina immediately on urgent business. But Abu Ubaidah, he was way too sharp. He saw right through it. He knew exactly what Umar was trying to do, pull him out of the plague zone to save his life.
As historical records document, Abu Ubaidah firmly rejected the caliph's offer. He wrote back saying, "I am in an army of Muslims. I have no desire to save myself in preference to them." His profound sense of duty meant he would literally rather face a deadly, horrific epidemic than abandon his post and his suffering troops. When Omar received this reply back in Medina, he wept so hard that people around him actually asked if Abu Ubaidah had died. Omar just replied, "No, but it is as if he has."
Shortly after organizing an evacuation to higher ground to try and save his people, Abu Ubaidah himself contracted the plague. Before passing away at just 58 years old, he gathered his soldiers to deliver his final advice. And what's amazing is, he didn't speak about military strategy or his legacy. He spoke of spiritual discipline. Establish your prayer, fast, give charity, remain united, and always support one another. Even in his dying breath, he was the ultimate caretaker, the Amin al-Ummah, guiding his people to the very end.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to take a second and reflect on your own journey. We live in a world that is completely obsessed with accumulation, with status, with self-preservation. But Abu Ubaidah's life, it challenges all of that. He showed us that true power actually lies in what you are willing to give up, not what you can accumulate. So, ask yourself, if you achieve the absolute pinnacle of your career tomorrow, would you still remember your core mission? Would you stay true to your values when faced with the ultimate temptations of success? It's a pretty profound legacy to live up to. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and keep seeking that clarity.